This episode is brought to you by Accenture. When your advertising operations fall out of sync, everything else follows. Spotify and Accenture are working together to reinvent the rhythm of ad sales, using automation, analytics, and smarter workflows to simplify campaign delivery and access better data across the business. The result? Less time spent on operations, more time connecting brands with the moments and fandoms that matter most. Learn more at accenture.com/Spotify.
This is the follow-up. I'm Jeremy Hobson. We're bringing more of your voices into the conversation each week. And today we are following up on our conversation about what you would change about America as it celebrates its 250th birthday. We got a lot of comments on the live show. The phone lines were full the entire time. You never know what's going to bring in that many calls. Obviously, that topic did. And we are so happy to welcome our guest today, Julian Zelizer, author and professor of political history at Princeton University. His Substack is called The Long View. Julian, great to see you. Thanks so much for coming on.
Great to be with you.
Well, before we get to what people actually wanted to change about America, we are talking just a few days before the actual 250th birthday, the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. It has been politicized so much, and a lot of people want just nothing to do with it. And I wonder how you feel about this anniversary, just as an historian. What does it mean to you?
Well, I mean, these are always politicized. And so every time we go through this, in 1976 was famously a contentious period because of Vietnam, Watergate, and people debated, what do you celebrate? How do you celebrate it? There was a commission to figure this out that's disbanded because things get so heated and they think of a new way. So I don't act with surprise, but I do think it's a good moment. Celebration means different things. It could be a critical celebration. It could be a wholly positive celebration. But it is a good moment to think about the history of the country, where the country is right now, and to use that, even if it's contentious and fraught, to ask difficult questions. And that's how I think of these days, beyond the barbecue part and the fireworks part. I think this particular one, because of when it comes, is an important opportunity to have that introspection.
Because there is something to be celebrated about having a democracy last this long.
Absolutely. I mean, democracy, in my opinion, is a good thing. It's a good development in history. And this is a democracy imperfect, and it's a democracy that has required struggle to make whole, and it's still not whole. And we have to remember that. It's not as if the founding had it all right. It was profoundly flawed. But still, we are now, from the Declaration, 250 years into this, and at least the ideals and the basic system, I think, are enormously important to where not just things have been and improved, but where things need to go in the future.
So you say it was flawed at the founding in ways. Is there something that you would do if you could snap your fingers right now and make one change about America? What would it be?
Well, I wish we had full franchise for every American right from the start, and that wasn't something that had to be the product of activists and fights and struggles that involve people losing their lives, that the Constitution and the founders understood that you don't have a democracy in reality, until everyone can be part of that democracy. And for me, that's a pretty basic challenge that we have faced as a nation, and we still face that today.
Well, and in fact, it seems like it's moving in the other direction right now, as it's getting more difficult for a lot of people to vote. So a lot of callers focused on changes to the Constitution and changes to the way our government works. Listen to this one.
Hi, my name is Jim Owen. I'm calling you from South Dakota, and I think the most important thing we can do to move our country forward in a positive manner is to enact term limits for our congressional members. Congressional term limits will help clean up our government and all of the existing conflicts we have in it.
Julian, what do you think about that? Would term limits make a big difference, and do you think that's possible?
It's an old demand, and I've heard this many, many times over the years, and I've seen it before I was alive reading the old press. I'm not sure that will work, to be honest. I mean, the flaw with term limits, as appealing as it sounds, just have people in and out, is if the system is working well, when people are in office long, they gain a certain level of expertise about government that is very useful in making decisions. They gain an expertise about politics and the responsibilities of governing, and they develop relationships with each other, which is actually something we don't have anymore. Famously in the 1950s and 60s, Lyndon Johnson, who's Senate Majority Leader and then Vice President and President, has these incredible relationships with Southern Democrats, liberal Northern Democrats, Republicans like Everett Dirksen, and that was a product of time. It was a product of literally like a sports team being together for a long time. And even if you disagree, I think those are important for negotiation. And so I'm not sure term limits would actually cure the problems I suspect that the caller might see in the system.
Do you think that the term limits that we now have on the president post FDR are a good thing for this country?
Yeah, I think they are. I think 2 terms is a lot of time for one person to have power, and that power has expanded substantially since FDR, including Supreme Court decisions in 2026. So I think that has worked. It's a little different in Congress, which is a much slower institution, complicated institution, and one where you can't do as much quickly as a president can.
It's interesting that the last constitutional amendment that passed in this country, which was in the 1990s, involved members of Congress and rules for them. It was about their salaries, that if they raise their pay, it won't go into effect until after the next election. Do you think that constitutional amendments are still possible in this polarized world that we live in, or would it be too difficult to get all the necessary people on board?
It's hard to imagine. I mean, simply at the congressional level, the difficulty we see doing basic things, anything beyond the budget, and even the budget is pretty contentious, so hard. And we now at least have this 60-vote requirement in the Senate because of the filibuster. And it's just an institution that's pretty paralyzed in general. And so I'm not convinced it can move forward with any significant amendment. And then the states are now very polarized as well. So it's really not easy to see how that process would work.
Let's listen to another caller. Here's one.
Hi, this is Jordan calling from Madison, Wisconsin. To think that we need to change our tax structure, raising the taxes on the most wealthy of Americans and cutting taxes for middle-income Americans, because the wealthiest should pay the most taxes in this country. And we also need to undo some of the Trump tax cuts that he has already passed. The policies of the Clinton years did work for this country, so I think raising taxes on the most wealthiest 1% of Americans would really help our country out, and lowering taxes on the middle income bracket would really help our economy out, and also make those permanent, not just for 10 years.
Julian, as we hear that, we're at a point where we have the world's first trillionaire in this country, and the world's first trillionaire in the world, Elon Musk. Do you see any chance to rein in the power of the wealthy, or how does this compare to previous times when we've had this kind of split?
President Clinton actually pushed through a progressive tax increase in 1993. It was one of the first things he did. It cost him a lot of political capital. So in 93, it was still possible to do that. Look, we had, in the post-World War II period, we had a tax system that was taxing wealthy Americans at much higher rates, over 90% than we have today. And one of the big impacts of the Reagan Revolution, followed by President Bush through President Trump, has been to erode and reverse that. The tax system is one way to start to address an era now where you have billionaires, trillionaires at levels this country has not seen before. And then there'll be questions for other kinds of measures as well that deal with wealth inequality, but also redistribution. I mean, there's 2 parts of it. One is, how do you tame the wealth, and Elon Musk has? But secondly, we've seen an erosion of the social safety net, which is equally important in moving money to programs like Medicaid. Is it possible? Yes. I mean, we did it. This country has done that before, and we shouldn't think the status quo is permanent.
But did we ever have a moment in this country's history where money wasn't as important in politics as it is right now? Because you can sort of like cut taxes for the wealthy and then they can fund your campaign. And then it's a circle that just makes it much more difficult to change things.
Well, I mean, money's always important in American politics. And there's lots of quotes about the mother's milk of American politics being the dollar. And, when the Rockefellers reigned, they had immense influence, even if it wasn't always through direct campaign finance. And this is an ongoing story. FDR railed against the wealthy business people who had ruined the politics of the country and made solving the Depression a lot harder. So it is an old story, and we have to remember that. The two things that have made it harder is simply the level of wealth in the upper strata is not what we've had in this country before. There's just a lot of, again, billionaire trillionaires, let alone people a little underneath that who are still and combined with a campaign finance system where through Supreme Court decisions and through failures of Congress to deal with this issue, private money is flooding the system. But look, you think of 74, the Watergate period. One of the first things Congress does in response to that era is pass campaign finance reforms. It set up a quasi-public system for presidential elections, which lasted for a long time, contribution limits, and Congress did it. So we do have moments of reform, and it could be almost the opposite, that things are getting so bad that you see political pressure mount, even with the money the Elon Musks are giving.
Do you agree with J.D. Vance, the vice president, that if Watergate happened today, it would be a 12-hour news story?
Yeah, I was just telling someone he's absolutely right for the wrong reasons, meaning I think he is right that if Watergate happened today, it would be a quick story. I don't think it would bring down a president. We've seen much worse. We are seeing, many believe, much worse as we speak in terms of the abuse of presidential power. I think he's wrong in that it's not as if it was irrelevant, the scandal, or it's not as if all the investigations were wrong to see what they saw in 74. The point is, we no longer have a system that seems capable of recognizing that kind of bad in American politics. And so the argument is the Trump administration benefits from a numbness or an unwillingness to do something about scandals that are much greater than Watergate. So yeah, he's right, just for the wrong reason.
All right, we got more with Julian Zelizer when we come back in just a minute. You're listening to The Follow-Up.
This episode is brought to you by San Pellegrino Ciao. A gift from Italy to your home. San Pellegrino Ciao is a flavored sparkling water made with real fruit juice, finished with a pinch of Sicilian salt for a perfectly balanced taste. So which flavor will you choose? Peach, lime, blood orange, cherry, or maybe the all-new limoncello? Crafted in Italy with 0 grams of added sugar. San Pellegrino Ciao. Buy it now.
Welcome back to The Follow-Up. I'm Jeremy Hobson. I'm joined by Julian Zelizer, professor of political history at Princeton University. His Substack is called The Long View. Julian, how much has screen time and social media changed us as a country? And do you think that there will ever be a move in the other direction?
The second part, I don't really know. It's hard to imagine that. It seems we're moving more and more into a screen time culture. I think it's had a big impact politically, for sure. I think, people like Chris Hayes have written about being in the middle of an attention political economy, meaning the commodity is, can you keep people's attention? And it's very hard. And democracy requires attention. It requires the ability of politicians to sustain people's focus on an issue for more than a day, because democracy is not quick. Congress takes time to reach deals. And so if we don't have that, I think it really erodes our ability to deal with big problems. And I also think, back to J.D. Vance, the quick attention, the inability to really look at something for more than a few minutes or a day hurts our ability to hold leaders accountable, because they have a huge benefit now. All they have to do is wait it out, and the odds increase that nothing will happen regardless of what you do. So those are two immediate ways in which I think this has had an effect. There's many more damaging areas. I don't know if it'll be reversed. It's really cooked right now into our communication system.
Well, on the flip side, in terms of accountability, I've often thought that it's going to be difficult now for a president to be in office for more than 4 years because people forget so quickly what it was like before. And they're like, oh, yeah, this is different. I want something different. I don't like this right now.
No, that's true. It could be. It could be we're ready to move on quickly. Even if you're a FDR, Ronald Reagan, people will forget about that within a day, and it could. We'll see. But the basic kind of point of this, I think, is it is posing huge challenges to the way our democracy works.
All right, let's listen to another caller. Here's one.
Hi, my name is Kendall. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee, and I am calling because I would love if the very uniquely American problem of gun violence would completely go away. There's a lot of common sense things we can do to prevent gun violence and still respecting the Second Amendment. There's a lot of data out there that we just need to listen to and decide that our American lives are worth more than the gun lobby.
So, Julian, for our listeners who don't remember, the Second Amendment states, quote, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. How do you, as an historian, view that language as a barrier to gun control in this country? Or do you?
Sorry, Jeremy.
No, go ahead.
I don't see it as a barrier. I that's one area where I hear that kind of, not only is the language itself, to me, not clearly prohibiting efforts to restrain individual use of weapons. We're not talking about militia anymore, although that's also become an issue. It's also, that was written in an era where you didn't have semi-automatic weapons. I mean, there has to be a reality check when you're looking at the original language. We're in a much more dangerous, fraught environment. And so there's lots of regulations. We have had some on the books. We had an assault weapon ban from 1994 for 10 years after that. That had an effect. And I don't think that's an area where it's clear to me. I don't even see the argument that we can't have common sense gun regulation. And this is a political area. It's a little like I was thinking of the movement for same-sex marriage, where it's an issue where lots of people are exposed to the problem. It's not some isolated issue that most people don't deal with. I think with same-sex marriage, values changed quickly because everyone had family members of different sexual preferences in red and blue. Yeah. And it's the same with guns. No one likes their kids, whatever state you live in, having to go through lockdowns. And so I do think there's room here, as frustrating and difficult as it is, to make progress. But I don't think the constitutional language prohibits the country from doing this.
Well, if you think about it as a safety issue and you think about other things that have happened in the past where we actually have made a real move towards safety, you think about, seatbelts in cars, banning drunk driving, which I looked back at when that started. It started like soon after cars, but Massachusetts was the first state to do it. And then many other states, and now, of course, you can't drink and drive anywhere, bans on smoking in public places. We've made those decisions as a country along the way that did impinge on people's freedom to do things, but we said yes as a country.
Look, even airport security after 9/11, many of us remember what it was like before, and it was significantly different. And that was an impingement on liberty, on convenience. Still, people are frustrated with it, but the country did it, realizing that was an area where danger could emerge. And so we've made these sacrifices before.
I want to get to one last caller. Listen to this one.
My name is Maya, and I'm from Dallas, Texas. One of the things that I would like to change about America is having stronger enforcement of federal antitrust policy. We've gotten to the point in this country, in my opinion, that many companies are just too big to fail. And even when they hurt consumers, we are not seeing enough done from the government to actually protect consumers against the companies.
It's interesting that of all the things that you could think of, that it's antitrust is what Maya thought of there. But it does come at a time of deep media consolidation going on all around us, not to mention other big companies that are getting together. What do you think about that?
It's a great question, and it's also an area to add where there has been bipartisan interest in it. You'd hear pretty right-wing conservatives praising Lena Khan of the Biden administration. And look, we live in a world where antitrust is an issue. If you ask most people, I don't think is going to rise to the top. There was an era in the 19th century. It was a big question. That said, the effects of trusts and concentration of power within the economy are really obvious to most people. I mean, Amazon is one of the most dominant presence I would suspect in most people's lives. And I think there's a way for politicians to talk about this issue, to connect it to bread and butter experiences and concerns of most American families. And I would add, it has other effects. I mean, the problems we see in parts of the media with the Washington Post is how that concentration even grabs hold of other institutions such as the media, or with late night television hosts feeling pressure because the owners don't want to lose other economic interests. So I think it could be a big issue in the future, but it will require politicians who can tell a narrative about it, that it's not an esoteric question for economics classes, but it actually touches on how much you have to pay and what you have access to on a daily basis.
You mentioned the 19th century. How do you think that this moment in terms of the power of corporations compares to the past?
We're clearly in the same place, if not worse. That was an era where you had obviously different dollar levels, but you had enormous concentrations of wealth, and those concentrations of wealth were connected to the way the political system worked. That's why we had the early 20th century is called the progressive era. There's all sorts of reforms like the direct election of senators. That's a response to how much money was influencing politics. So we're in at a minimum, we're in a comparable era, and some of the same questions are now emerging about where do we go next.
All right, I have one more question, and then we'll get to your prediction. And the question is, as we think about America 250, if you zoom out now as an historian, how do you think the Trump presidency is going to be remembered 50 years from now?
I think it's going to be potentially a transformative presidency. I don't think it's transformative in terms of policy in the way that Roosevelt or Reagan or Lyndon Johnson were, that leaves behind a body of programs that we still have. But in terms of presidential power and an assertion and legitimation of the president as the primary force in American politics at a way we haven't had, I think this is not going to go away anytime soon. And secondly, connected, the style of political partisan attacks that this president was willing to make, meaning partisanship could include weaponizing even the Department of Justice. Partisanship could include the president using language, dehumanizing language about opponents and adversaries. All of that combined is going to leave a huge mark on our democracy. So I think people will be talking about this and dealing with the consequences for a long time to come.
Okay, I guess that's a prediction, but do you have another one to give us?
Yeah, my big prediction, and I'm not a doctor, but there's so many changes in healthcare right now that I've been reading about that I think we could be on the cusp of an era where what healthcare policy is changes really dramatically, kind of like in the 50s with vaccines and curing diseases like polio. And I'm not talking about vaccines today, but I think the potential for attacking and containing and controlling problems, including cancer, seem to be very, very close. And I think it's not the kind of thing we automatically think of as a new era, but I think we might be getting there. And I just suspect 50, 60 years from now, we could be looking at a transformation in medicine and health that was quite important.
I mean, just GLP-1 drugs, for instance. And then also, I will agree with you on cancer in that every time I have a friend or somebody who gets a cancer diagnosis, my first thought to them and statement to them is like, you're in a different world now. Like this, the medicine is getting so good, so personalized, so fast. Like you have a good chance. And I've seen so many people come back from their cancer diagnosis and be just fine and in remission. And so, yeah, that's the best prediction I think we've ever had on the follow-up. So thank you for that. Julian Zelizer, professor of political history at Princeton. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks for listening to The Follow-Up. It was produced by Harrison Patino. Our next middle episode is coming this week. We're going to be asking what America's 250th birthday means to you. I'm Jeremy Hobson. I'll talk to you soon.
You mind if we make one more stop before heading back? I need to run a Target.
100%. Let's RTT. You thinking of stuff for the dorm?
Yeah, my mom gave me some good tips on must-have essentials. We for sure need underbed storage, handheld iron for wrinkles, maybe even a mini Keurig for Mondays. Am I right?
All right, bet. Because I was already thinking about keeping my clothes looking fresh at college, so you better be sharing that.
Of course, man. Whatever I get on this run is yours too.
Twin.
But for real, let's go before they close.
Find everything you need for college at Target.